What in your experience has been the lesson that you've learned that's taught you the most that you'd want to get out to as many people as you can?
Yeah, I'm no good with stuff like this. I can't think off the top of my head very well. Like the lesson I've learned that's taught me the most that I want to get out to as many people as possible.
Yeah. Could be life
I
or
mean,
music, whatever, you know.
can I just give you like loads of different things to answer in various
Yeah, go on.
aspects?
Yeah.
Um, so for people in bands that just focus on being as good as you can, don't worry what anyone else is doing, even if it's the same as what everyone else is doing, just as long as you like it and you believe in it and you put a lot of effort in and you want to make it as good as possible. It might take a while to get there, but all the people that I'm friends with that are in the industry professionally are just the ones that stuck it out and that like just did it just because they love doing it and they want to do it. So there's that. Also, I guess specifically to do with guitarists, don't rush, don't try and go fast, just try and play for endurance and try and play as cleanly as possible, and speed will come later. But yeah, in life in general, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Don't have that Jaeger bomb.
Yeah, definitely not. Yeah, I mean, I don't drink or anything, so yeah.
Yeah, I someone handed me one the other day and I was like, I haven't had one of these in a while. I had about 2 sips. I'm not even gonna, I'm not, this isn't me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait, speaking of like sort of with on the music sort of musician side, I guess. I was looking at a quick interview that you did. Were you saying it, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying it didn't maybe feel like Sylosis was being sort of given the time of day at some point in along a sort of career from things like press and that. Is that kind of right? Where, because what I was going to ask about was for anyone that's maybe struggling in that kind of, you know, in a band that maybe you don't feel like you're getting that time of day. What would your advice be? Is that right? Have I got that right from there?
Yeah, no, I've seen a few. I've done a lot of press recently, and I've probably said something similar to that. And I've seen some articles that have come out already, and I'm like, that's not exactly what I said. But I mean, yeah, to a degree, like Sylosis, particularly when we were coming up, and there was a buzz around us, like when we did our first record, and we could sell tickets and go on tour and stuff, but we weren't necessarily like what was trendy, but people liked it. So a lot of the more trendier metalcore bands would get covered, and like people just sort of turn their nose up at us, maybe because it was more just like traditional metal, I guess. So maybe that's what I was alluding to. But it just doesn't matter really. Like more and more these days, like you just have to get out there and do what you love, and there's always an audience for everything. So yeah, hopefully that I didn't come across like I was just like having a moan or like, oh, we should have been bigger or anything like that. Definitely not what I meant.
No, I mean, I know how like how I think my experience sometimes is it's felt like sometimes it just feels like you're quite, I suppose in the nature of just so many bands about nowadays that it feels like a lot of people, whether it be industry people or just like fans in general, can be quite quick to dismiss. Maybe that's the kind of the feeling I've got sometimes. I'm not trying to put a very negative spin on.
I mean, they can be like that, yeah, but like obviously as time goes on, and myself included, I think people's attention span's not what it used to be in terms of everything being so like instant gratification with like everything on our phones and everything like that. But I don't know. Yeah, you just have to do things because you love it and you believe in it, and not really worry too much about that. It's hard though when you're starting out. But yeah, I think more what I was alluding to is that there were definitely people into Sylosis and we had a good following, but it wasn't necessarily like being covered.
Yeah. With that kind of on that topic of like I guess sort of doing what you love and trying to sort of stay true to that. I know there's something I've noticed that just in sort of the music, particularly in sort of metal, is you don't see so many sort of singer guitarists in the metal world. I don't feel nowadays. Maybe that's maybe there just always hasn't been that many. But yeah, whenever I picture someone like, I don't know, like James Hetfield or someone, I find it kind of I don't know. I feel like there's a sort of, we kind of live in a world where there's a lot of people suffering with issues with their confidence and issues with putting themselves out there. And I'm sort of wondering whether maybe that's contributing to people shying away from the frontman kind of role, whether that be just pure singing or the sort of singing guitar thing. I don't know if that's just my kind of hypothesis as to why maybe there are fewer, apparently to me anyway, fewer sort of singer guitarists out there. Is that something that you could?
But wouldn't there be more? But wouldn't there still just be singers though? Anyway, so I wasn't sure what your point was, because obviously there aren't like more. I'm sorry, I'm really not trying to be pedantic. I'm just trying to understand your point. But wouldn't that mean, with what you're saying, wouldn't that make it sound like there was more instrumental bands? But I think it's just less common to have a guitarist that sings and more common to just have an external singer.
Yeah, I suppose maybe a better question would be, do you think, do you feel like there are less sort of singer guitarists around nowadays?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's, particularly within metal and like live shows, like it's cool having a front man that isn't bound to the spot, so I get that, but and it's really hard to do, play guitar and sing, and it takes me ages to like learn a song with vocals and guitar at the same time. I can do one or the other, but doing both, I'm like, oh, it's tedious to practice. Like even this far in, it doesn't get any easier. Like if something goes against what the other one's doing rhythmically, it's just hard. So yeah, but it is a lot less common. But it was, I think it's been getting less and less common like since the 90s, to be honest. I think like Pantera was sort of like, everyone was like, oh yeah, they didn't want to be like Phil Anselmo or Dimebag, and the more like older bands from the 80s were more like guitarist vocalists, I guess. I don't know. I haven't thought about it too much, but yeah.
Yeah. It was. I think my sort of hypothesis, I guess, was that there's a lot of people, and I suppose this really actually doesn't just apply to singer guitarists, it just applies to vocalists. There's something very exposing about putting your vocals out there. It's a very personal thing. And I think the way, I see a lot of young musicians, and I have to include myself to some degree, whose confidence has been sort of harmed in some way just by, I don't know, the way the world is nowadays with all the social media and stuff. And I was kind of, I suppose, wondering whether we might see even in future a decline in the amount of people getting out there as vocalists and fronting bands, because I know how hard it is to try and find a singer for a band. And I don't know, but then again, I suppose in terms of the guitar vocal thing, you do get the benefit of, if you can split those two up, not having to, like you said, fight against your guitar when you're trying to sing. So yeah, that was just, I suppose, my hypothesis, but actually the way you put it makes more sense. So yeah, it's an interesting one. In terms of like your when it came to like getting this album together, I was, again, I suppose I'm relying on another interview here, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you sort of made a mention of, I think, how Adam sort of maybe pushed you to certain places or maybe encouraged a certain level out of you with the new stuff. I know a lot of people, myself included, try and like to think that they can do things alone, I don't know, maybe you feel a sense of pride, I suppose, if you feel like you've done something by yourself. But I suppose realizing that having people in your corner, realizing it's important to have people in your corner, I think is a big thing. How do you deal with kind of having other people involved? Like, I know you talked about being a bit more, like having an outside producer as well this time around. How do you deal with like having other people around you, and do you feel that that's benefited you?
So just quickly, Adam is the band's manager for anyone unfortunately doesn't know. He pushed us a lot. In terms of what you said about like feeling like you've done something on your own and like accomplished something, like I still wrote, or the band at least wrote all the music for the record. So it's not like anyone was co-writing with us or we had gone somewhere else to write the music. It was more just like what Adam, our manager, was saying was that he didn't feel like we had tapped into our full potential as a band. Like there's something there in our music that I think our fans see is like maybe goes a little deeper than some bands, or like just the attention to detail maybe that we put into our music. We have quite a diehard following, but he just said that we could just do better. It was just like, you could just do like a classic metal record if you want, and like do a record that's going to like solidify you and like stand the test of time and connect with people in ways that you haven't really done. And I was just like, yeah, like I was proud of the last record, but on looking back, I think I personally had always shied away from doing anything that was like either too obvious or anything that was like too anthemic for people thinking it was like, I don't know. But all the stuff I grew up listening to was like anthemic, even if it's super heavy, like the Great Southern Trendkill or like Iowa by Slipknot, you know, like People Equal Shit. It's like anthemic, even though it's like super heavy. But we had never done that before because I think we were too scared to dip our toes into doing anything like that. So he helped us just like push us into try and focus on writing a record that was just the strongest thing we've ever done. Like make every song something that could be released as a single, or just have like every section just be like, oh, I can't wait for that bit to come in, or I can't wait to hear that song live. Which we haven't really approached an album like that before. And then including Scott Atkins, he's worked with us in the past, but he's never like properly produced us in terms of getting involved in arrangements. So we gave him the songs early on and just said, just give us your most brutal, honest feedback so we can, because even though Scott was in a band, Stamping Ground, who were pretty successful UK, like I guess metalcore band, but hardcore metal band, he's really good at just putting his head in his mates who are just generic metalhead punter guys who don't never played in bands, don't play an instrument, they just like going to gigs and stuff. And he's just like, what's going to connect with them live? What do they want to hear and feel? And like, what's going to resonate and what's going to, you know, like, for example, we had this song Pariahs, and I had the front half of the song and the second half was, I can't remember now. And he was just like, no, you need a bit in the middle where like you've got the bass drum going, you've got like the blinders on the stage, the big lights, and you're singing Pariahs and the whole crowd knows to sing it back. And I'm like, oh yeah, like we've never done like stuff like that. And he's like, that's what like my friends who go to gigs, they want to like, you know, you've got to sort of feed this stuff to them and like get them involved. And so yeah, none of the involvement was taken away from the fact that this is all stuff that's come from us, but it just helps, I think. And there's a sort of youthful arrogance I think everyone probably suffers from when you're like 18 or whatever, and you're like, I'm pretty good at guitar, and like I've written some songs, and you're like, oh no, I know exactly what I want us to do. And it wasn't necessarily that I'd ever dismiss anyone's input, but didn't like seek it out, or it was like, no, we got this, just, you know, you hit record and I'll play the song, sort of thing. And this time around it's like, I just want what's best, and like hear as many different opinions as possible. And even if you end up going with what you wanted to do all along, at least entertaining other ideas or just hearing people out is beneficial.
Yeah, I think that the ability just to listen is important. Like, how do you feel like you've sort of developed as a person through the music, sort of through the music you've done? How do you feel like you've maybe developed personally? Are there lessons you've learned? It's almost going back to your first question in some ways, but you know, lessons in things like, I don't know, whether it's sort of patience or sort of an ability to, you know, hear out other people's opinions. Are there any things that you've picked up that
I mean,
carried you in life?
Something that's come up a lot in press, like when people obviously ask about architect stuff, is something that was important was when I first started writing for Holy Hell, and like the first two songs I sent to Dan, because it was just me and him doing the writing. Like I'd write a song and he'd sort of produce it and arrange it, and I sent him, I think, Mortal After All and Modern Misery, and he sent them back, and he'd like, that riff is now there, and that the verse is now the chorus, or whatever. Like, I'm just making stuff up, but it was very like, you know, he'd move stuff around in quite a drastic way. And for me, I'd spent quite a while on the songs. I had this vision of what I wanted the song to be like, and it came back different, and that was really like jarring and uncomfortable for me, as it would be for most people, like when you've worked at something and you've got like an idea of what you want it to be, and then someone goes, nah, it's going to be this. It was uncomfortable, and it took, you know, an album or towards the end of the album to like get used to that being the process. But it's hugely beneficial to learn to like just let go and be a bit more open to other opinions. And with it, you know, with retrospect, like sometimes you're like, oh yeah, what was I thinking with my original demo? And every now and then, yeah, it might have been that I might have preferred my version of the demo, whatever, because, you know, at the end of the day, it's all personal preference when it comes to music anyway. But that was hugely beneficial for me, like as a person, just like being a lot more collaborative and not like holding the reins as tightly. So with Sylosis now, like it's great, you know, we're trying to get, you know, the other guys in the band obviously are involved, but then getting a producer to really get in there and, you know, just be honest with us, or even like the artwork. Just our friend Snakehead just did it, and he's done our logo, the whole merch range. He's sort of just headed up the whole aesthetic for the record without me having to do it, and that's something that as well I used to be like latched onto, and I can just focus on the more important things.
Yeah, with all the sort of speaking of, I suppose, the more important things, like with all of this stuff, how do you kind of, obviously, especially you talk about kind of pushing yourself for this record in particular, and I know that the typical musician thing is it's never quite good enough. You know, it's always like, you know, I could tweak this or I can add this in, or, you know, you listen back and how do you like decide when, especially if you feel like you're trying to push for something a bit different, how do you find a sort of level where you're happy with something, you know, and has that level kind of changed from, say, the last record or maybe over the years?
I hate to sound like, I don't know, arrogant or whatever, but I feel like I've always had a good barometer, at least for my own writing, of like a standard of quality, of like if something is good enough or if it feels a bit too standard or stock. Like I kind of know if something needs to be better to appease me anyway. And the whole point of, you know, with Sylosis is try and be your own favorite band, like try and write something that you'd want to hear and is actually going to get you excited. So if it doesn't do that, you kind of just know it's just like a intuition. Like you just know if something's good because you just want to keep playing it again and again. So with the songs, I feel like you just sort of know when it's good and like knowing to take a step back in terms of songwriting and stuff, or vocals or lyrics. What the main thing for me that I struggled to stop with is mixing, because there's just an infinite possibilities or directions you could do with that. And yeah, I took a long time on the mix.
Yeah. Is that it kind of, does it ever get kind of, when you have, so, you know, when you have such great control over the whole sum of the music like that, do you ever kind of, and again, talking about you sort of outside influences of having other people there, do you ever kind of get a bit like almost tone deaf where you're listening to it and it almost, I know I've been there when I'm trying to play something or write something and I listen back and I almost just forget any sense of what I was trying to do with the thing. Because you just almost, I suppose, that fatigue of just hearing the same thing over again, I find personally difficult.
It does happen. Like there was a song, I think we might put a video of this in on our Instagram. Like there was a song we did, it's a one-off single that we recorded at the same time as the record, called Heavy as the Crown. And like, I think there was a riff in the song and I just couldn't, I was like, is it good or is it crap? Is it like, and especially with like simple stuff, there's such a fine line between like something being effective and really cool and satisfying or just like boring because it's so simple. So that in particular is always like hard to know, like, especially if you've heard it a lot. It's like you just need someone else to come in with a fresh set of ears and go, oh, that was cool. Or you'd be like, no, it's boring, get rid of it. And then yeah, just go, okay, cool.
Yeah. Could you put your finger on for any, I suppose, any keen guitarists or musicians in general, but could you put your finger on what is the difference between a catchy riff and one that's just straight up sort of generic?
you just kind of know, I guess. Like it either feels really satisfying and sounds good, and you want to listen to it again, or it just washes over you and is boring. But it's really dependent. I mean, there's no formula for any of it really. It's like the most obvious example is like the riff to Walk by Pantera. Like there's a fine line between something like that being like boring or like, oh, that's sick, you know. And obviously everyone's going to have a different opinion anyway. But when it comes to simplistic stuff, yeah, it's really. I mean, I feel for the most part, I know if something, even if it's simple, and like if it feels good, and I just want to keep listening to it. But again, like maybe that's just my taste. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't. I think it's a difficult one. I do think you can overthink it as well. Like it's one of those. Like I always say to, because I teach guitar, I always say it to my students. But like I teach a few of them on the songwriting side as well. And kind of the ultimate rule, I think, is just like if it sounds good, it is good. I think that's what, you know.
Yeah.
Like, and it sounds simplistic, but I think you can actually take that quite a long way. I think with like when it comes to your sort of lyrical stuff. I was having a quick flick through your Instagram. I saw you talking about sort of writing about sort of society or sort of modern, the way sort of modern society is to some degree. And what do you feel like you're sort of, in terms of if you were to write, say, about your own experience versus, say, your interpretation of what's happening in society nowadays? To me, they seem like quite different, you know, sort of avenues to take if you were to different avenues to sort of write about. Do you find that you get in different sort of headspaces to write about different topics, whether it be about yourself or about sort of wider society, or is it all kind of coming from the same sort of place?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's different headspaces generally. Like when you look at, you know, like the world as a whole, or maybe some of the stuff that is in the lyrics, like. I can't remember even now specifically, like some of the stuff for the song Deadwood, like not the entire lyrical theme, but you know, it's loosely about people who are willing to literally chase just profit over anything, like to the detriment of like the entire planet, like destroying the planet. But well, we've got to meet our bottom line, and like all these industries just like going, well, we can't change now. This is what we've been doing. It's like, yeah, it could destroy the planet, but it's like, well. We're making money. So that's just one example of a song, or at least like elements of what like that song's about, which is completely different to a song like Absent, which is more of like just a personal thing. But I guess there's an element of my own feelings or emotions behind all the songs. Like the stuff that I was talking about, like with Deadwood, is something that yeah, like obviously angers me if I see it or like hear about, you know, that sort of thing happening, or even like, I guess there's not as much like stuff to do with like animal rights on this record, but that's something that I get like angry about, I guess. And then Absent, something that was more sort of introspective and kind of feeling, it's kind of about the being sort of like depressed and like wrapped up in your own head and feeling guilty that you're not actually acknowledging that the person that you're like the people that you care about are struggling with something just as bad, and you're just making it all about you and just feeling like crap and then guilty about feeling crap. So that's the example of what Absent's about, or another song on the record. So it's yeah, I guess it all comes from my reaction to the world, I guess. But I try not to get too oh, this is how I see things, or like this is my agenda that I'm trying to push, or anything like that. It's more just reactionary, I guess.
Yeah. So just one last quick question before I take up too much of your time. What would you say, do you write, I suppose it might sound a bit blunt, say like, do you write for you or do you write for other people? That sounds a little kind of blunt to put it like that. But, you know, when it comes to writing lyrics particularly, do you feel like it's some sort of expression and some sort of avenue for you to get things out? Or do you write for the purpose of sort of delivering some sort of message to other people, or is there some other sort of completely different reason? Is it a bit of everything? Like,
so musically, not that you asked that, it's always for ourselves and try and be your own favorite band. Like, that's the easiest way to know if you're, like what we were talking about earlier, if you're going to like something or if you think it's good. If you're aiming to be like, if I mixed all my favorite bands and all the elements I like the most into one band, and if I could listen to that, what would it be? So like for music, it's completely selfish, and lyrically, it's mostly for me. But with this record, definitely try to make a conscious effort to not like hide my lyrics in metaphors and like wrap it up in some big mystery like I used to do, to just because it's kind of exposing and I'm like kind of private, or just didn't really want to have to like put all that out there. And now it's just, just like more confident with that stuff. I don't really mind talking about it, and it's cool to be able to like just connect easy with people and like people understand what a song's about, and it just be, I mean, not that everything's like easy to just sell, for people listening to pick it apart and see what my intention was, but they can at least maybe interpret it in their own way a bit easier.
I'm still guilty of being the metaphor guy, so maybe one day I'll transcend and evolve beyond that, because I do admire that. So yeah, okay. So just quickly before we go, I need a question to start the next conversation and an artist pick. Yeah, that's cool.
What's an artist pick for?
So just like an artist that you'd like to promote to the world that you think deserves.
No, I'd like to promote.
Yeah.
There was someone I was thinking of the other day that I wanted to pick.
A lot of weight.
I'm going to say Earn. Those guys are cool. They're doing well at the moment, and we've been friends with them for a while. But yeah, got a lot of time for them. And Harriet, obviously, you know them.
Yep.
Get a shout out those two for cropping up. In terms of the question, I mean, that's just.
It can be anything. Absolutely, I've had the most ridiculous things. I can't even. There's one question where I can't even believe I asked the person that question. Not even going to repeat. So it's been the whole span of things. So,
I guess this is just coming out of nowhere. I don't even know if that's a good enough question to make sense. I was going to say, like, at what point in your career do you only deal with artists and musicians?
Yeah, it's mainly like musical.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, what do you feel like you're going to continually get better at writing music, or do you feel like there's a limited window in which it will be really good, and then either side of it's not as great?
Oh, that could really trigger someone. I'm interested to ask that. That's a good question. It might hit someone in the at the wrong moment, but we'll see. We'll find out.
Yeah, sorry.
yeah. If
I won't be there to bear the fallout, I'm afraid.
Yeah, I'm just catching a band on the way down. Like, oh, sorry. Yeah, amazing. Thank you very much, man. It's been awesome.
No worries.